another lesson here for you just to give you more practice on factoring. This is the second part of lesson 3.3a on factoring when a is equal to 1. That means that your first x squared term or whatever does not have a coefficient. Remember that when you are doing this, it's super important that your equation is equal to 0. If it's not, you need to make it. You cannot factor if your equation is not equal to 0, okay? So always remember that and get your equation set up from the start equal to 0, then you can factor. Now I'm going to work through some problems here. It would be a really good idea for you to pause the video and maybe do step by step and see where you're at in your learning, okay? This first one here is already equal to 0, so I don't have to do anything with that. So I am going to break it apart into my two sets of parentheses. Again, this is a point where you might want to feel free to pause the video, try it out for yourself, and then push play again and see where you're at. The d squared breaks apart into d and d. And then I want to know what factors of 25 are going to add to make 10. Well, clearly 5 and 5 make 10, okay? So I'm going to use the 5 and the 5. Now here's the thing, I need a negative 10. The only way to add to make a negative 10 is if I do negative 5 and negative 5. Now we talked about that when you're solving, you can always take the opposite of the parentheses. In this case, the parentheses are the same. So I really only have one answer. It's a double root at 5. You're welcome to write 5. You're welcome to write it twice. I don't care. It's entirely up to you, okay? So if you want to designate that it's a double root, go for it. If you just want to write 5, that's fine as well, okay? Because, of course, you always have the work to support your answer. Make sure that you're showing your work for this, and then we don't have any problems with the answer. Now, looking at this one's a little bit different, okay? This is factoring, but not quite how you think. So if I look at these two terms, I notice that they both have an x. So instead of breaking this apart into two parentheses, I'm going to factor out an x from each of them. Look what I just did there. I took an x away from x squared, which leaves me with x. I took an x away from negative 5x, which leaves me with a negative 5. This is factored, and I can solve this. I know that x is going to equal 5, because I know I'm supposed to take the opposite of the parentheses. But what does this first x equal? Well, I need my equation to equal 0, right? So what number could I put in for x that will be equal to 0? 0. Anytime you're factoring an x out of the equation, you have a root or a solution at 0. I kind of like these because I think they're pretty easy. You just factor out an x, find your other root, done, okay? So anytime you're factoring out an x, because both terms have an x included, that means that your solution for that x is going to be 0, and then you just find the other solution that's in the parentheses. Let's try another one here. Now, this one is not equal to 0, so you need to make it equal to 0. I would pause right here, do what you need to do to make it equal to 0, and then turn the video back on. I'm going to subtract the 18 to make it equal to 0. I hope that's what you did as well. Then I can break apart into my two parentheses. I'm going to make the b squared. I'm going to separate that into b and b. And then I'm going to figure out what factors of 18 are going to subtract to be 7. How do I know it's going to subtract? Because of the minus sign in front of the 18, okay? That tells me that I'm subtracting the two factors to make negative 7. Clearly, I can see that 2 and 9 will work. But how do I know which one to subtract? Well, I need a negative 7, and the only way to get that is to take 2 minus 9, which means that when I'm getting my answers, they are the opposite, negative 2, positive 9. Okay, be really careful about your signs here. Make sure that you're getting the right signs in the right spots and with the right number in order to get that middle term to be positive or negative as it needs to be. Now this one is not equal to 0. I could subtract my d squared and get everything on the right side. However, I think you've seen it in both videos so far. Keep your squared term positive. It makes life easier. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to subtract the 12d and add the 36 to get them on the other side with the d squared. Okay, this is going to allow me to keep my d squared positive, which is what I want, and it's not too difficult to deal with the other numbers. I'm going to break this apart, and I'm going to take the d squared and break it into d and d. And then I want to know what factors of 36 are going to add, because I have a plus sign, to make 12. Let's see, we've got 2 and 18, we've got 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 5, 6, and 6. Clearly, I can see that 6 and 6 are the only ones that are going to work, but I need to make that a negative 12. So I'm going to make negative 6 and negative 6 in the parentheses, which means that my solution is actually, positive 6. Remember, this is one of those ones where I would have a double root at 6, and so my graph would not go through the x-axis, it would touch it, okay? As always, this has been a production of Ken Alonzo Inc. We're here to help you learn math. So if you have any questions, let us know. We are more than happy to help you solve a quadratic or do anything else. Take care and stay safe.